Hey guys, welcome to a new GameMaker tutorial series on monster breeding for GameMaker Studio 2. This first video will cover the very basics of how to breed two monsters together to create a child based on the parents. It's designed for beginners who are just starting to dip their toes into GameMaker, so I will be explaining things as I go along. The second video will cover how to use arrays to save a lot of time, and will also introduce new functions to play around with. So first of all, let's talk about the sprites. So there's a couple of ways to draw the sprites for monsters in GameMaker. You could just have the same monster sprite a dozen different times and colour them all individually yourself, and then when you breed two monsters together, it's going to pick a colour of that particular monster based on its parents. The other way that you could do it, the way that I've done it, is you can have all the monster sprites as a white background. So let's go into the faces, this one here. So I've got three different shapes. These are the faces or bodies of the different possible monsters, and they're all white. And we're going to use GameMaker to colour them in based on the colour of the parents. What I will be showing you in a future video is how to shade your faces using grayscale, so that when you apply a colour to them, they'll be already shaded, so they'll look a bit better than just like a all yellow or all green or all blue. The way that I have designed the sprites is I created a base first, which was just a circle, and then I drew a line where I wanted all the eyes to go, then another line for where the noses go, and another line for where the mouths go. So no matter what mouth, eye or nose the monster has, it's going to draw it in the same place. And then if you look at the eyes, this is the origin point of the eyes. So the middle of the sprite is this origin point, and the eyes are always going to be drawn around the same area. So the single eyes is there, two eyes, three eyes, four eyes. You can make as many eyes in as different shapes as you want, as long as they all match up to the center, the origin point. They're going to fit in the right place for your sprites. Again, you can have monsters of different sizes, heights, anything you want, and breed them with other different sized monsters, and still display the eyes, nose and mouth in the proper place. The only thing you would have to do is to make a note of where the eyes for that particular monster sprite need to go. This is going to be covered in the next video, so don't worry about that today. The noses are all centered on the same place as well. Okay, so after we have created the sprites, the next thing we want to do is have an object that can draw them. So we're going to create an object called Obj Monster. Normally you would assign a sprite to an object to draw, but for this particular instance we're going to use its draw event. Before we do that though, we need to assign some variables for it. Okay, so each feature we want to draw will have its own variable. So for faces, we'll have face, and we'll tell it we want the first face, which is 0. Eyes equals 0. Nose equals 0. Mouth equals, you guessed it, 0. And horns, now if we tell it to draw horn 0, then every monster will have horns. So we're actually going to have horns as a boolean. So we're going to say for now horns equals false. We don't want this monster to have horns. The other thing we want is we want a colour for the face of the monster. So we're going to have the colour as red for now. So the face will be red. Okay, so now we have these variables in the draw event. Just zoom in for you so you can see it. Pause the video if you need to. We're now going to go into, we're going to create a draw event. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is draw the rearmost feature, which is going to be the face. So we're going to use a function called draw sprite ext for extended. This allows us to use other functions. So let's get rid of this. If you look on the bottom, GameMaker has a really useful function. It lets you know what variable it's expecting. So whenever you're using the inbuilt functions, you don't have to keep checking the manual to see what to do next. So it's asking for a sprite. We want SPR faces because we're going to draw the face. So SPR faces is the first sprite. Sub image. So it's asking for which image index we're going to use. We've already created a variable called face, and face is set to 0, which is this first image. 1 would be the square, so image index 1 is a square, and 2 would be the hexagon. So in our monster object, we're going to put our face variable, which is 0. We want everything to be drawn at the monster x and monster y x scale. So this is going to be useful more in the second video because this will modify the sprite to make it either larger or smaller on the x axis. So for example, if you wanted to make it smaller, you'd type in 0.5, which would halve the size of the sprite. The y, if you left it as y scale 1, then it'd be like an elongated version of the sprite. But for this tutorial, we just want x scale to be 1 and y scale to be 1. Rotation, we don't want to change the angle of the sprite, so we're going to leave that at 0. Color, we've already assigned a variable for color, which should be red. And alpha, this affects how transparent the sprite is going to be. We don't want any transparency for this sprite, so we're going to set that to 1. Okay, so now we've set up the face sprite. We're going to do the same for the eyes. So copy and paste. This is now going to be, instead of SPR faces, it'll be SPR eyes. We're using the eyes variable, and everything else can stay the same, apart from color. We're going to change this to see white. If we didn't change this, then instead of having the white eyes, they'd be shades of red, which might be something you want, but not for this. In this tutorial, we're not after that. So copy this second piece. So after eyes, we want nose. So SPR nose. Eyes will become nose. Everything else can stay the same. GameMaker 2 has a really useful function. It recognizes sprites and variables you've already typed, you've already created. So if, for example, I typed SPR noses, it turns white. So that means I've made a typing mistake. So if any of your code isn't the same color as mine, then you may have made a typing mistake somewhere. Again, with nose, if I type noses, it changes from like a purplish blue color to white. So nose, mouth will be the next one. So SPR mouth, mouth. And the horns is different. We only want this monster to draw horns if horns is true. So we're going to write a simple if statement. So if horns is equal to true, then draw sprite. We can just use a normal sprite for this, so draw sprite SPR horns. Want the first index, X and Y can stay the same. There we go. So now if we go into our room, change the width of the room to 640 and the height by 480. It's a nice size room. Then we're just going to drag the monster object into the room so we can see what's happening. Now if we run the game, hopefully we should be able to see the monster with all its features. Okay, so there we go. So the face variable is set to 0, which is this first image there. It's the color of red, which is what we told it to be. The nose is the first nose, and the mouth is the first mouth. We did not tell it to draw horns, so it doesn't have any horns. I'm going to quickly show you how to do a random variation. So each time you run the game, the monster will be randomly generated, and then we're going to get into the actual code of having 12 different monsters on the screen, picking 2 and then breeding them. So go back into Object Monster. So in the create event, we're going to add a few more variables. So total faces equals sprite number. Sorry, sprite get number. SPR faces -1. So what this does is sprite get number will tell us how many images are inside the sprite faces. So it's going to return the value of 3 because there are 3 images. We're going to tell it to, we're going to have the -1 because we don't want total faces to be between 1 and 3. We want it to be between 0 and 2. The reason I'm doing this as well is no matter how many images you add to the face sprite or any of these sprites, you don't have to change this code because it's already checking how many images there are in the sprite. Okay, so we're going to need one of these for the eyes, nose and mouth as well. So let's copy paste total eyes equals sprite get number eyes, total nose sprite nose mouth SPR mouth. Let me just change noses to nose just to match the sprite. And with horns, we'll address that in a minute. Okay, so instead of having face equals 0, we're going to have face equals I random total faces. What I random will do is I stands for integer, which is like a whole number, 1, 2, 3. It's going to pick from 0 to total faces, which is 2. So between 0 and 2, that's going to become our monster's face. Eyes will become I random total eyes. Nose will become I random total nose. mouth will become iRandom total mouth. Horns. Okay, so for horns, we want it to either be true or false. So roll equals iRandom 1. If roll is equal to 1, then horns will be equal to true. Else, if roll is 0, and it's anything apart from 1, horns equals false. Okay, so we've done face, eyes, nose, mouth, horns, color. So here is where we're gonna have some different colors. So we're gonna tell GameMaker to choose from whatever list of colors we define. In the next video, we're gonna have some nicer looking colors, which are gonna shade our sprites. But for this one, we're just gonna use the basic GameMaker colors. So C red, C green, C blue, C yellow, C lime. I think that'll do for now. So what GameMaker will do is it'll choose one of these 5 different colors, and color, our variable color, will be assigned to whatever GameMaker picks. So let's run the game, and we should have a different random monster generated now. Okay, so there you go. So it's a different monster, but the horns are out of place. Let's find out why. So the draw event, draw sprite, horns, XX. Okay, that's why. So XY. Oops. Hopefully you picked up on that, but I completely missed it. So let's run the game again. There we go. So we have a random face. It's chosen the hexagon, which is number 2. It's chosen the image index 1 for the eyes. I'm not sure which nose that is. It's chosen number 2 for the nose, and it's got the first mouth, and it's C lime, I think. So this is how we're going to create our parent monsters. It's going to create a dozen randomly generated ones, and we're going to pick 2 of those to create a child. Okay guys, so after we have done the random generation for the monster, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a script to create 12 randomly generated monsters that are going to be our parents, and we're going to use those parents to create the child. So if we go into script, right click on script, create script, we're going to call it, rename SCR create monsters. So at the top we're going to write SCR create monsters. You don't have to do this bit, but it's useful for future scripts, because if you're passing variables, you can tell someone that we're going to pass the X and its face. And in the same way that GameMaker shows you what functions the game is expecting, so here, like, it's expecting sprite, subimage, XY, you'll see for your own scripts what to type in, so it will show XX and face. So that's why we're doing that for now. Okay, so we're going to copy the code from Obj Monster, because this is the random generation code, and we're going to use that in the script rather than the monster itself. So we need to add one more variable at least, which will be max monsters. and we want 12, so max monsters equals 12. Alright, so we're now going to make a for loop. So for I equals 0, I is less than max monsters I plus plus. So what this loop does is while I is less than max monsters, so it'll loop from 0 to 11, we're going to run the code that's inside there. And I plus plus is just the same as typing I equals I plus 1, but it's just a lot faster to type I plus plus. So all this code is going to go into this for loop here, and the first thing we need to do is tell GameMaker to create a monster. So monster equals object instance create depth. So we will start the generation from the very far left of the screen, which so the leftmost coordinate for x will be 0, and the width of the sprite is 64. So if we tell it to start from 32, that'll be fine. Y, we will do it from the top, so again 32, so 32 pixels across, 32 pixels down. Depth, this is it's basically the same as layering with the face, eyes, nose, mouth. So for now we can just set a depth of 0. Object will be object monster. Okay, so what we've done is we've created a variable which stores the ID of the instance we're creating, which is the monster. We're going to do this 11 times. So there's going to be 12 times. So there's going to be 12 instances of Obj monster. Okay, so we now have to tell this monster what its random generation is. So to access this monster's variables, we have to type monster dot. So if we didn't have the monster dot, face is just going to reference whatever object is calling this script. So change this to monster dot face and monster dot eyes, monster dot nose, monster dot mouth. Roll equals irandom1. If roll equals 1, monster dot horns equals true, else monster dot horns equals false, and monster dot color equals choose. Alright, so this code will run 12 times. The other thing we haven't done really, if we don't change the x and y, it's going to create 12 monsters in exactly the same place. So we're going to tell it to, we want the x 32 plus I times 64. So if I equals 0, I times 64 will be 0. So the first monster will be drawn at 32. When I becomes 1, it'll be 32 plus 64. That's where the second monster is going to be drawn. The third monster will be 32 plus 128, and so on and so on. So if we run the game now, nothing's going to happen because we need to create an object. Okay, so we're going to create our controller object, our main object. So this is the object that controls everything. Object main. All we need to do for now is in its create event, we're going to call the script, so create monsters. And the last thing to do is delete the monster that we made. Add object main. And of course, we have to delete or change the code in monster. Color equals CY. Okay, so this is just initializing the variables for the monster. All of its random generation is going to be done from the script. So if we now run the script, the game. Alright, so we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We've got 10 monsters in the game room. There are 12, but they're drawn off the screen. So as you can see, they all have random generation. A lot of them have got horns. Let's change the probability for that to more like, say, 30%. Okay. So go back into the script, create monsters. Let's make a new variable. Horns chance equals 30. So roll equals irandom 100. If roll is less than or equal to horns chance, monster.horns equals true. Oops. Monster.horns equals true, else false. Alright. Now, rather than having the 12 monsters drawn in one line, we're going to have it drawn in two. For this, we're going to need to have a second for loop. So for var h equals not, h is less than 2, h plus plus. All of this first loop code is going to go inside this one. And if we left it as it was, it would create 24 monsters, because it's going to run when h is 0, it'll run I from 0 to 11. It'll run this code 11 times. Then h will go to 1 and it'll run this code 11 times again. So we actually want max monsters divided by 2, because we want this to run 6 times. When he times it by h, which is 2, it'll run 12 times in total. This is only because we want to use h as for the y coordinate. So 32 plus h times 64, because the height of the sprite is 64. Now let's also center the monsters in the room. So let's make 2 more coordinates, or 2 more variables, sorry. Xx equals room width divided by 2. So that's the center of the room. We want to start drawing the monsters 3 monsters away from the center, which would be 3. Oh, no, actually, it's going to be 2.5. So room width divided by 2 minus 64 times 2.5. So change the x coordinate to xx. And instead of 32, let's make it, let's have yy equals just 64. Yeah, that'll be fine. So 64 plus h times 64. So if we run the code now, we should have 2 lines of 6 monsters. There we go. And most of them don't have horns now. That's probably because of the decreased chance. And I've also forgotten to change 64 to YY. YY does equal 64, but it's always better to use the variable so that you don't have to hunt through the code. And if you're using the variable more than once, you only have to change it once. You don't have to change it all the time. Okay, so we have now created our monsters.
Okay guys, so the next thing we're going to do is create 2 breeding boxes. These are the 2 boxes that are going to show the parents that we selected before we breed them. So right click on Object, OBJ breed box. For the sprite, we're going to use this one. So just it's another 64 by 64 sprite. We need 2 images, one for selected and one for not selected. So for deselected, I've chosen this one, and then I've just copied that sprite and I've coloured in the middle of it, the middle border,
with a brighter colour. And those are going to be the sprites for the breed boxes. So go back into Object Breed Box, and where it says No Sprite, click on that. I'm going to choose SPR Breed Box. Okie doke. Now we want to place them in the game room via Object Main. So in Object Main, in the Create Event, we're going to define some spawning variables. So bbox x, so bbox 1 x, yeah. So the first box's coordinates for the x, we will have that as 96, and bbox 1y, we can have it room height minus, we'll go 96 again. So it's going to be, the first box is going to be 96 pixels away from the left hand side of the screen, and 96 pixels up from the bottom of the screen. And for the second box, bbox 2x, we're going to have that the room width take away 96, so it's going to be 96 pixels away from the right hand side of the room. And bbox 2y is going to be the same, as the first box, because they're going to be on the same y coordinate. So now we've assigned the variables, we're going to create the b boxes. So bbox, actually let's use a for loop for this. So for var t equals 0, t is less than 2, t plus plus, you want it to run 2 times, bbox equals instance create depth. And we can use, yeah, okay, we can't do that, can we? Okay. We're just going to type it twice because we've already signed the variables. So bbox 1 equals instance create depth, bbox x 1x, bbox 1y, depth of 0, object breed box. I'm going to assign a variable to this box. bbox1 dot num equals 1. So what this will do is we're going to type in some code in a minute whereby when you press the number 1, this particular breed box will be selected, and in the second box, when you press 2, the second box will be selected, and this is how you're going to decide which parent goes where. So when you press 1, any monster you click on is going to go into that box. When you press 2, any monster you click on is going to go into the second box. So we just need to change the some of the code now for the second box. So bbox x2 equals 2x and the same y, and bbox2.num equals 2. Let's just check it. bbox1 1x 1y and 1. bbox2 bbox2x. I just changed it to 2y. Yeah, it's fine. 2y. bbox2y is the same as 1y, but if we ever change this variable, it's better to use it in the code. So, okay, right, and we also need a global variable. So, so far we've only been creating variables whereby to access them from other objects you have to type a dot. So if I wanted to access a monster's variable, I would have to type monster equals instance create blah 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 monster dot face equals 3. So with the global, you just have to type the global name. So we're going to have global dot selected box equals 1. So as soon as the game starts, the first box, the one on the left, is going to be selected. And let's just type in some code now. So if keyboard check pressed odd 1, global dot selected box equals 1. Copy this code, and if keyboard check pressed odd 2, global dot selected box equals 2. Okay, so now we need to tell the breed boxes to change the image based on whether 1 or 2 is pressed. So in the draw event, we're going to have to tell it to draw itself first, because if you ever assign a sprite to the objects which we have, and you create a draw event, which we have, and you don't tell it to draw itself, it won't draw itself. So draw itself, if global dot selected box oops, equals none, then image index equals 1, else image index equals 0. So what we've done here is we're saying if the global variable is equal to the num that we assigned it. So in the create event, we assigned the first box on the left with a num of 1, and the second box on the right with a num of 2. So if global selected box equals either of those, then we want the sprite of the breed box to be 1, which is this image, so it will show as selected. if the num variable does not equal the global selected box, then it's going to show the image index of 0, which is this one. And I've also noticed that we're going to need to move this variable to here. If we don't, then Object Breed Box might try to read this variable before it's been created, because down here we're creating the boxes first and then the variable, so we're going to need to move that variable here. Okay guys, so let's quickly check that the code we've just written is working. So when the game starts, you can see that the left box shows highlighted. That's because we initialized the variable at 1. If we press 2, then the second box is highlighted. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, cool. So then the next thing we need to do is create an object called Obj Mouse. This object is going to follow the mouse around. And the first thing we need to do is say x equals mouse x and y equals mouse y. So all we're telling it to do really is this invisible object is going to be following the mouse around. So wherever the mouse is, that's where the object is. And we're also going to use this to detect if the mouse is hovering over any of the monsters. So the first line of code will be if collision rectangle. Let's just make a bit more space. So x1 is going to be x, y1 is going to be y, x2 is going to be x, y2 is going to be y. So the x1 and y1 is the top left of the rectangle. X2 and Y2 is the bottom right of the rectangle. We're only really interested in whatever pixel the mouse is hovering over those, so we're just going to use the X and Y for both X1 and X2, Y1, Y2 over the mouse. The object we're going to check for collision with is Obj Monster. Precise, we don't need precise collision detection. And not me. That's really only relevant if you're trying to detect the same kind of object from the same object. So if Object Monster was trying to detect a collision with another monster, then not me, you would set to true. But because we're using Object Mouse to detect, it doesn't matter whether you type true or false. Okay, so before we continue with this code, it's going to be better if we assign a few variables first. So the first variable we want is if you go into Object Monster and in the create event, we're going to have selected equals false. And then in the draw event, if selected equals true, then draw sprite SPR monster selected 0 XY. We need to make the sprite as well, which I made before I started recording. So all I've done is it's another 64 by 64 sprite, and I've used green lines to go around it, and it's centered in the middle like all the other sprites are. So what should happen is when we click on that monster, if it's selected, then it will display this green rectangle around it. Just go back into the monster, make sure that's all done. True. Okay, cool. And then the other thing is in Obj Breed Box, we're going to add a new variable called parent. Parent equals no one. Now, what this means basically is no one means no ID, because we're going to be assigning the ID of different monsters to it. So every instance of Obj Monster has its own ID, and whichever one we click on, we're going to want it to be assigned to whichever breed box is selected. So now we have those variables in place, we can now go back into Obj Mouse. So I'm just going to copy and paste this code from my notes just to make sure it's down properly. So what we've typed is check to see if the breed box already has a monster. So with object breed box, so what this does, it's going to check every instance of obj breed box. If breed box is none, is equal to global.selected box, so it's either going to be 1 or 2. So if this is true, then if breed box's parent is not equal to no one, then whichever monster is already assigned as the parent, that monster's selected variable becomes false. Now at the moment, when we set up the variable parent, it's set to be no one, but as soon as we click on a monster, it's going to assign the ID to the breed box, which is going to come in the next piece of code. So for the next piece of code, we're going to copy this piece here, so collision rectangle xyxy, and paste it here. Monster equals the collision. So all we're doing really is finding which instance of obj monster has been clicked on. Only select the monster if it hasn't already been selected, because we don't want to have the same monster twice, otherwise it's just going to create babies that are the same as itself. So if monster.selected is equal to false, if it hasn't already been selected, monster.selected equals true. And with obj breed box, so we're going to cycle through both the breed boxes again. If this is the currently selected breed box, then that breed box's parent now becomes the monster we just selected. Now we have to type other.monster, because when you do a with statement, it's the same as typing this code inside obj breed box, and that's why we can type none and not obj breed box dot none. And because this code is basically inside the breed box, if we want to reference this monster variable, we have to use other, which says that we're now going back to the instance that called the with event in the first place. Okay, so now we have typed that. Let's test it and make sure it works. So I've just spent probably 20-30 minutes trying to fix a bug. It's a very stupid one. What was happening is, because we didn't assign a sprite to obj monster, there was nothing to detect a collision with for the mouse. So if we go back into obj monster and we just choose SPR faces as its sprite, we're not going to draw it, but it's going to give a frame of reference for the mouse to collide with. So if we now run the game, this should work. We should be able to select monsters. Okay, cool. So as you can see, we can select any monster, and because we haven't changed the bounding box, it will only allow us to select one at a time. But if we select this one for the first bounding box and then change to the second one by pressing 2 and select the second one, then we have 2 monsters selected. Now what we're now going to do is whichever monster is selected is going to be drawn inside the relevant breed box. So let's get on to that now. So inside breed box, we've already initialized these variables: the face, eyes, nose, mouth, horns. So in the draw event, after everything else, we're going to say if parent is not equal to no one, so if it has a monster ID assigned to it, face equals parent.face, eyes equals parent.eyes, nose equals parent.nose, mouth equals parent.mouth, horns equals parent.horns. Oops, got a full stop there. And color equals parent.color. Now, anyone who knows about arrays will figure out there's a much faster way to do this, but for now, just to make it a bit more easier to understand, we're going to stick with this. So if parent is not equal to no one, then assign the breed boxes variables with the parents variables, and now we're going to draw those variables. So draw, let's copy this from monster, because we don't need to type all that out again. So draw event of the monster. We want to copy everything apart from if selected. So copy all this, go into breed box, and then paste here. Copy paste for the win. So when you finished, your code should look like this. So we're assigning the face, eyes, nose, mouth, horns, color to match the parent that's been selected. Draw face, eyes, nose, mouth. Cool. So let's run the code, and hopefully this should all work. Alright, excellent. So I've been able to select two different monsters, and they're going to show up in their in the different boundary breeding boxes. You can still change the parent just by clicking on different monsters, like so. So the next bit, we're nearly there. The next bit is to create the breed button, and then when you click on that, we'll create the child. Okay guys, so the next thing we're going to create will be the sprite for the breed button. So all you want is something with a width of 128 and a height of 64, and then just something simple like this just to click on. And once you've done that, we're going to go into objects, and we're going to create an object called Obj breed button, and we're going to assign the sprite that we just created there. Alright, so I want to display whether the button's highlighted or not. So in the create event, we're going to set up some coordinates. So x1 equals x minus sprite width divided by 2. Copy this, paste 3 times, y1 equals y minus sprite height divided by 2, x2 equals x plus sprite width divided by 2, and y2 equals y plus sprite height divided by 2. Okay, so we're just defining the coordinates for a collision rectangle. The sprite is, the origin for the sprite is in the middle. So we want to find out the top left corner. So the x coordinate is going to be half of the sprite width divided by 2 to the left. And the y coordinate for the top left will be the middle, which is there, minus half of the sprite height. And then for the bottom right, x2 is the middle plus half of the sprite width, and y2 for the bottom right again is y plus half of the sprite height. And we're just going to go into the draw event now for the same object. So draw, and first thing you want to do is draw self, and now we're going to do if collision rectangle x1 y1 x2 y2. You can see we're matching the coordinates that the function's asking for, so we're just making it easier on ourselves by assigning them first of all. Objects will be Obj Mouse, because we want to know if the mouse is hovering over it. Precise, no, not me. We'll go for false. Okay, so if the mouse is colliding with us, and I forgot to add a bracket, then we want to say draw set color C green, draw set alpha 0.5, and then draw rectangle. Again, same coordinates, x1 y1 x2 y2. Outline, no, we don't want it to just be an outline. And then we're going to reset the alpha back to 1. So what this code is doing is we're saying we want to draw in green, and we only want to have half of the normal transparency, because we don't want the green rectangle to completely obfuscate the breed button. Then we're going to draw the rectangle. Is it going to be an outline? No. So if we said true, it will just draw a green bounding box, which isn't what we're after. And then change the alpha back to 1, so that everything else will still be drawn in full transparency. If we didn't change that back, then everything is going to be drawn at half transparency, which is bad. Okay guys, so the last piece of code we need to do is going to be in the step event of this object, but before we do that, we're going to write the breed script. So create a new script, I'm going to call it scr breed. Let's type in here as well, scr breed. And we're going to use two variables, parent1 and parent2. So we're going to say if, so we're going to do the face first. If parent1.face is equal to parent2.face, then child.face equals parent1.face. Else, if they're different, then we want to choose one or the other. So choose, child.face equals choose, and then parent1.face or parent2.face. And this is the same code we're going to use for everything. So face and then eyes. So parent1.eyes, parent2.eyes, face, 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 eyes. And then we can do nose. Nose, nose. And then we want mouth. Mouth. Copy this. Again, if you know what you're doing with arrays, you'll know a much faster way of doing this. this I'll show you guys how to do it in the second video. So we've done face, eyes, nose, mouth, and we want to do horns. So if parent1 dot horns equals true, and parent2 dot horns equals true, child dot horns equals true if parent dot horns parent1 horns equals true, or parent2 dot horns equals true, child dot horns needs to do there's going to be 50-50 chance of the child getting horns if either parent has it. So roll equals 100, irandom 100. If roll is less than 50, child dot horns equals true. Okay, we want to actually have this above the first one, and we're going to say child dot horns equals false. So child dot horns equals false if parent1 dot horns equals true, or parent2 dot horns equals true. Then there's a 50-50 chance of the child having horns, and if they're both true, then the child will definitely get horns. Okay, and last of all is the colour. So if parent1 dot colour equals parent2 dot colour, child dot colour equals parent1 dot colour, else child dot colour equals choose parent1 dot colour, parent2 dot colour. Just put some comment here. And what we haven't done yet is to actually create the child. So child equals a monster create, oops, no, instance create depth, x coordinates. Where do we want it? We want it to be between the two boxes, don't we? Okay. So we'll have it in the middle of the room. So room width divided by 2. The y coordinate is going to be the same as the breed box. So object breed box dot y, depth of 0, and we want to create a monster. Okay, so the only thing we need to do is to make sure the child is not selected. Okie doke, so we now need to go back into the breed button, and we're going to create a step event. We're going to say if there's a collision, so if collision rectangle x1, y1, x2, y2 with the mouse, not precise, and we'll say false for that. So if you remember, we set up the x1, y1, x2, y2 in the create event. So if collision rectangle with a mouse, and if the mouse is pressed, so if mouse check button pressed, MB left for the left mouse button, then we're going to say that we're able to breed, and we're going to check the breed boxes to make sure that they've both got a parent, and if one of them hasn't got a parent, then we can't breed. So if can breed equals true with obj breed box if parent equals no one, then other dot can breed, because you remember in a with statement you have to reference this variable with other dot because it's not in the same code block. Other dot can breed equals false, and then after we've checked both breed boxes, so if they both have parents, then this won't run. So if can breed equals true, run the breed script. Okay, and the last thing that we need to do is actually spawn the breed button in the world. So we're going to have it at the very bottom. So main, create event at the main menu. So create breed button equals instance create depth, and we want it in the middle of the room, so room width divided by 2, and we're going to want it at the very bottom, so room height minus SPR sprite get height monster select, oops, not that one, breed button divided by 2, depth of 0, object breed button. Now let me show you a better way of doing this. So rather than having a really long sentence, let's just say but x equals room width divided by 2. That goes there. And but y equals this. Room height minus half the height of the button sprite. And it just makes it a lot easier to read if you need to check the code for whatever reason. So hopefully, if we now run the game, this is going to work. Okay, so select the first monster and the second monster and breed. Oh, okay, what do we do? Yeah, so we didn't create the parent buttons. Okay, so breed button. Yeah, we forgot to do that, didn't we? Alright. So in this with loop, we're going to assign parent 1 and parent 2 based on the num value of the breed box. So with object breed box, if num equals 1, other dot parent 1 equals parent, and if num equals 2, other dot parent 2 equals parent. So we're just assigning parent 1 and parent 2 for breed button based on which breed box we are checking. So let's run the code again. Fingers crossed there's no crashes. There we go. So we have a green square with 3 eyes. Oh yeah, they've got the same mouth. So it's got the nose of the first one, the colour of the first one. The eyes were always going to be the same, and it's a circle from the second one. Okay, let's just add something to the object main. So you can keep generating as many as you want. So we're going to say if this is in the step event of obj main. So if the keyboard check pressed, and it's going to be VK space. So if the space bar is pressed, we want to run. We're going to destroy all the monster objects. So with obj monster instance destroy, that's going to tell every instance of object monster to destroy itself. Before we do that, we want to make sure that the breed box's parents are reset to no one. So with obj breed box parent equals no one, and we should also reset the values for breed button with obj breed button parent 1 equals no one, parent 2 equals no one, and then finally run script create monsters. So every time we press the space bar, we're going to delete. So we're going to reset the parents for the breed boxes, we're going to reset the parents for the breed button, and we're going to destroy every instance of monster. Okay, let's try this. So press the space bar and we get lots of different generated monsters. So we're going to have this as the first one, and we'll have a circular one-eyed cyclops as the second. Breed them together. So it retained the horns of the first one. It got the eyes, nose and mouth of the second one, but kept the face of the first. And that's it. That concludes this first video. The next one should be up this week. It's going to cover things like arrays. So instead of having a load of lines of text, it's all going to be done by arrays. And I'm also going to show you how to create better looking monsters and how to shade them with colors. And we'll also cover attributes like strength, hit points, that kind of thing. Bye for now, guys.